In the sweltering midday heat, the highway pavement seemed ready to crack under the sun. A gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom suddenly ground to a halt in the middle lane. Inside, Richard Harrington, the notorious real estate millionaire, a man known throughout the city, was sweating buckets. He glanced at the bright silver watch on his wrist. Every second passing felt like a hammer striking him. He had $1 billion deal waiting, and this was the first time in his life he felt utterly powerless. Richard was used to snapping his fingers and having someone serve him. But now, on the freeway, drivers passing by glanced at his luxury car and drove on. No one stopped. Then, a rattling sound. An old truck, its cargo beds paint peeling, slowed and pulled to the side. The door opened. A black woman stepped out, her shirt stained with grease. Her jeans faded. She was not in high heels, not carrying designer bags, just wearing mechanic's gloves. Her name was Angela Brown. "You seem to have some trouble," Angela said, voice firm, not at all shy of Richard's disdainful glances. He frowned, about to refuse. In Richard's world, people like Angela existed only on the lower rungs, incapable of understanding a machine as complex as this Phantom. But when the horns behind him blared impatiently, he had no choice. Angela popped the hood, her hands moving fast, checking. Within minutes, she performed work that left Richard stunned by her unbelievably precise skill. But just then, Richard caught sight of something that made his heart stop. On Angela's wrist, beneath the layer of grime, shimmered an old silver bracelet, not an expensive piece of jewelry, but a simple band with a small phoenix carved by hand. Richard froze, because that bracelet, it was the gift he had once given to a little girl in an orphanage many years ago. And that little girl, could it be Angela? Angela Brown grew up surrounded by what people only recognize by two words: deprivation. Her mother died when Angela was too little to remember her face. Her father was never present. She was placed in an orphanage on the outskirts, where the chill of four walls sometimes felt more comforting than the whispers about the color of her skin. Later, Angela was taken in by an uncle, living in a ramshackle house next to a small repair shop. That was where she first fell in love with machinery. While friends her age dreamed of white dresses or new shoes, Angela found joy when her hands were caked with grease. Though often mocked, she persisted, tinkering, learning, and eventually opening a small garage in a poor town. Angela was not wealthy, but she was free, and most importantly, she never lowered her head to the scornful eyes of others. Meanwhile, Richard Harrington, his destiny had taken a completely opposite path. Richard, too, was an orphan, but he was chosen by a powerful real estate family and raised as a tool to inherit their wealth. To the world, he was a successful, polished man in tailored suits, always seen with luxury cars, silver watches, fine wine, but few knew, beneath that glamour, Richard was trapped in a gilded cage. He lived to please his adoptive father, to serve the family's interests, and to maintain the golden man image the media praised. His success was built on pressure, loneliness, and long nights no one knew about. Angela, a black woman looked down upon but true to herself. Richard, a white millionaire living in splendor but never allowed to live as himself. Two fates, two worlds that seemed miles apart, collided that blistering afternoon on the freeway. The hood of the Rolls-Royce was heavy, but Angela lifted it gently, as though she had done it many times before. Inside, mechanisms gleamed, intimidating many an engineer, but she only nodded, then quickly pulled out a few old tools from the truck. A worn-out wrench, a rusted screwdriver, nothing glamorous, no high-tech devices. With just a few adjustments, Angela found the problem and fixed it cleanly. Meanwhile, Richard stood with arms folded, half curious, half irritated. He had never seen anyone dare touch his Phantom without hesitation, let alone a black woman in grease-stained clothes. 5 minutes later, the engine rumbled back to life, smooth as if it had never broken down. Richard blinked, both surprised and annoyed. His pride had been bruised deeply. He let out a prejudiced question. "In a rural place like this, how do you know so much about luxury cars?" Angela did not turn around. She only curled her lips slightly, voice calm but firm. "I learn, I train. Being good is not a privilege of the rich." Her words made the air seem thick. Richard, used to people bowing before him, had never had anyone speak to him so directly. Angela handed back the keys. Her grease-stained hand brushed Richard's. And at that moment, he saw more clearly the silver bracelet on her wrist. A small carved marking, a phoenix with wings outstretched, etched on the dull silver surface. Richard's heart tightened, because that was the imprint he himself had carved on that bracelet, before giving it to a little black girl in the orphanage many years ago. He had once thought that memory lost in the past, but now it lived again, right on the wrist of the woman standing before him. Richard could not shake the image of that silver bracelet from his mind. Days passed, and instead of forgetting, he drove back to the poor town where Angela lived. Her small garage sat humbly by the roadside, the sign faded, surrounded by empty lots. In Richard's hand was a piece of old wood, worn by time. He held it like a treasure because once, in the orphanage, a little black girl had given him that very gift, a crude phoenix carved into the surface, along with a promise, "One day, we will find each other again." Richard stepped inside. Angela caught a glimpse of the wood, and the wrench in her hand began to tremble. Buried memories came rushing back like a flood. Nights when two children sat side by side, sharing dry bread. Innocent promises whispered in the cold of winter. "It's you," Angela gasped, choked with emotion. Richard nodded. The two childhood friends had finally found each other, but the joy of reunion quickly turned bittersweet. Angela revealed that the land where she had built her garage once belonged to her family. Her mother, a strong, determined woman, had it stolen by the Harrington Corporation using forged documents. After that, her mother mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind the silver phoenix bracelet as a final message to Angela. Richard said nothing, but inside him, a storm was rising. He began to investigate in secret, and the truth, once uncovered, left him stunned. His adoptive father, the man who had always preached about honor and legacy, was the one who forged Angela's mother's death certificate to seize the land. Angela was not just a childhood friend, she was his half-sister. Sharing the same mother, they were bound by blood and by the very bracelet they both had held dear. And Richard himself, he had never been a real Harrington. He was just an orphan chosen to replace the biological son the Harrington family had lost. His entire life, from his name, career, to his social status, had been a carefully staged performance. The Phoenix bracelet, once thought to be just a memento, had become living proof. It not only tied together childhood memories but also held the key to exposing the crimes of an entire empire. And Richard knew, from that moment on, he could no longer remain the billionaire. He had to choose, to protect the family's power or stand with the truth. With Angela, and with the long-lost sister he once promised to find. The grand opening of Harrington Plaza took place under a solemn atmosphere. Camera flashes sparkled, hundreds of distinguished guests made their way in. Richard's adoptive father, dressed in a perfect suit and wearing his trademark smug smile, stood on stage. Preparing to cut the ribbon, microphone in hand, ready to praise the vision and legacy of the Harrington family. Richard appeared, walking beside him as always, but today, his eyes were different, no longer submissive, but filled with unwavering resolve. Suddenly, from the crowd, Angela stepped forward. Beside her was an elderly woman with graying hair, a gaunt face, but eyes that still burned bright. The room erupted into whispers. It was Angela's mother, the woman the Harrington family had declared legally dead with a forged certificate. Angela stepped to the front, her voice echoing through the hall. "Today, I am not here to witness another false celebration. I am here to demand justice, for my family and for everyone who has ever been robbed by the Harrington Empire." She laid out folders in front of the cameras, forged contracts, illegal land documents, evidence of unlawful imprisonment, and finally, Angela held up the silver phoenix bracelet, proof of their bloodline, and of a truth that could no longer be denied. The hall descended into chaos. Journalists snapped photos, TV cameras streamed every second live. Richard stepped forward, locking eyes with his adoptive father. His voice was firm and clear. "I am no longer a Harrington. I was an orphan, used, turned into a tool. But today, I choose to return to the truth. I am Angela's brother, and I stand with her." The crowd exploded. Richard's father tried to protest, but police officers arrived, backed by the evidence Angela and Richard had submitted earlier. The man who once stood at the pinnacle of power was handcuffed in front of the entire world. His fall marked the collapse of the Harrington Empire. On stage, beneath the flashes of lights, Angela and Richard stood side by side, no longer the lost children of years past, but real siblings, fighting together for justice, for their family, for themselves, and for everyone who had ever been silenced by the lies of power. After the scandal rocked the nation, the court returned the land to Angela's family, but instead of turning it into a large garage or exploiting it for profit, Angela chose a different path. On that land once soaked with tears and injustice, she built a community center, a place with free classes for underprivileged children, a small nature preserve where people could find peace. Angela believed the only way to heal the past was to plant seeds for the future. Richard changed as well. He gave up the Harrington name and reclaimed the name Brown to stand with Angela. As true siblings, he founded the Brown Foundation, a fund supporting orphans and victims of injustice, because more than anyone, Richard understood what it meant to grow up in an unfair world. At the opening ceremony of the community center, Angela's mother, after so many years of being imprisoned, stood there, tears rolling down her cheeks as she watched her children reunite. She held both Angela's and Richard's hands and whispered, "You did it. You brought light back to this family." The silver phoenix bracelet, once just a child's keepsake, had become a symbol of rebirth, a reminder that truth can be buried, but never erased. And the story of Angela and Richard proves one thing, that love, justice, and courage will always have the power to break down any wall of prejudice. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to continue following these journeys in search of truth and justice.